Hello, my name is Peter Robbins, and I'll be one of your hosts for the next few hours as we go through the largest collection of UFO film and video footage ever assembled. My colleague?
Hi, my name is Antonio Huneos. I'm a science journalist, and I have been involved in UFO research for over 20 years.
My involvement goes back a little longer than Antonio's, but we've been colleagues for all that time, and we are very pleased to be doing this with you today. What we are about to see spans the entire history of UFO studies, with few exceptions. First footage runs from 1950 and goes right through to 1998.
Yeah, and I think there's absolutely no doubt that this is the best collection of footage available anywhere. Mike Hesseman, our colleague from Germany, has done tremendous research work of just compiling all these very strange items that you will see.
Yeah, and what we'll be seeing ultimately is still a mystery, even to so-called specialists like us in the field. The best we can say is that something is a genuine unknown and seemingly under intelligent control in many cases, but what it is, I guess, is best defined by the term UFO.
Right. A lot of people kind of automatically identified UFO with an alien spacecraft, which is a very valid theory for explaining UFOs, but UFO basically stands for unidentified flying object and basically means something unknown, unidentified.
Exactly. I think for me, the longer I've been in the field, the more I respect what I really don't know. And I ask a lot better questions than I used to, but this material is absolutely central to the study. It is shot in most cases by independent people all over the world. Some of the early footage even includes a cutaway from, say, a television commercial or a news spot where something is seen in the sky and the camera just goes right to it. When we get into the age of VCRs, we see a lot more shot by regular civilians.
Right. You will see here that in the first tape basically compresses 3 decades because those were the days of motion picture cameras and they were obviously not as widely available as the video camera. And the video camera was a revolution also in the UFO field, in which it allowed people to tape things on a much more massive basis.
Indeed. Also, some of the early footage that we'll be seeing is authentic so-called Project Blue Book footage. It is materials that was studied very carefully by the Air Force and entered into, after all their analysis, the area that they called high strangeness. Wonderful term, an actual authentic term, and it basically means we don't know what the heck we're looking at here.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that they're all cataloged as unidentified. The Blue Book, of course, tried to explain as many cases as they could, but even Blue Book had to admit after 13,000 cases that they logged over a period of 22 years, about 700 did remain unidentified. And there were, of course, many other cases which were probably real UFOs, but for political reasons they explain away as Venus or balloons or whatever was convenient.
Indeed.
As even their old scientific consultant, Dr. Hynek, later acknowledged.
On another program on this same DVD, you'll have an opportunity to review at your own pace one of the finest collections of fully authentic American government declassified documents dating from the summer of 1947, and in this case, running well into the 1980s. It is a huge compilation, very similar in terms of its ambitiousness of this remarkable video collection, and we encourage you to spend time studying these documents. They read phenomenally like a Tom Clancy novel in a way, and redefine the history of what we would call post-war America.
Right, and they cover the whole span of the UFO controversy, which as we will see even here in the footage, you know, at least what we call the modern era begins in 1947, basically because that's when this phenomena, which has probably existed for centuries, acquires a name.
And as we go into our first bit of footage here, what we're going to be seeing is from a movie, an actual commercially released movie in 1956, simply called UFO. And as I recall, Antonio, that was actually the year that that term came into being. Before that, it was flying saucers, wasn't it?
No, actually the term existed previously, but it was only used in some military memorandums and things like that. I think it was this movie and the book by Ruppelt in 1955, which sort of
Popularized the term.
Brought it to the public. And of course, the term flying saucers remain even up to the late 60s. It's still used today, but not so much. And what we're seeing here is a recreation of the famous Washington, D.C. Radar visual cases during the summer of 1952. There were a total of 3 different episodes. And they're very faithfully recreated because in this movie, because the consultant was Al Chubb, who was the Air Force press attaché.
Indeed. Plus the fact they really do capture some of the feeling of the times and the attitude of the Air Force, which was basically one of resistance. This was a terrible public relations problem, and the fact is that the Air Force got stuck with it because they happened to be called the Air Force.
Though in this days of Ruppelt, that was probably the most open-minded period of Blue Book. Later, Blue Book became a very, here we go into one of the very early classics, the Montana film of 1950. And here you see General Samford, who was the Chief of Air Force Intelligence. And this was the other famous footage from the 50s, the Tremonton, Utah from 1952. Mm-hmm. Very, very classic. The best film from the 50s, and which even the Air Force took very seriously.
And again, you're watching grainy copies, probably copied over several times, but what we're seeing up there is a genuine series of unknowns, as they were often referred to at the time.
Yeah, here we see now in more detail the Great Falls, Montana, take by Nick Mariana. That's a water tower, if I remember well. Mm-hmm. And these 2 films, as well as this one,
the Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah, this is less known than the other 2, although historically it's definitely one of the, I guess the second one. There might be some other obscure ones, but...
These are the ones that for folks like us were generally accessible. And once again, Tremonton, Utah here, names like Delbert Newhouse, when you study the work, are some of the legends. They were cameramen, I believe, a military cameraman.
Yeah, a Navy cameraman, I believe. These were even shown to the Robertson panel that was convened by the CIA in 1953, actually, January of 53. Mm. And they spent quite a bit of time looking. Of course, they tried to explain them. One of the explanations was that they were birds, I believe. But
big white sort of round birds.
Yeah, but even the Navy had done their own independent analysis, and they didn't agree with the CIA conclusions. It's all explained in the Ruppelt book, which is a classic, and it goes into quite a bit of background about, not only the Blue Book era, but these films as well.
And for any students of the subject that want to learn more, there are many good books in print, but one of the things, being committed bibliophiles, book lovers that we are, is going to the older material and familiarizing yourself with it. Ed Ruppelt was, in fact, an officer assigned to Project Blue Book, and not that he broke ranks, but he did publish, was at the time, a remarkably forthcoming book on his involvement. What was the actual title of that book?
The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects.
And still available as a,
as a used book, but it was quite a bestseller at the time, so there were many copies. This is from Luke Air Force Base. Could be a high-altitude aircraft, perhaps.
Absolutely possible. It is, again, this is in the early days of jets, and that contrail was pretty indicative of it. But again, we really don't know.
Yeah, and I don't have the files with me at hand, so I'm not sure exactly what the Air Force concluded on that one. This is from 54.
Oh, yeah.
This must be one of the grainy
ones. That's it. What you just saw, that was it. Again, most of our viewers here have grown up in a time of great film sophistication. We've seen special effects in films, whether or not it's been Star Wars or Jurassic Park or Forrest Gump that really are so extraordinary that it makes you somewhat distrustful of what can be done in film. This is a more innocent time.
Well, yeah, this one now is interesting because this was during a scientific expedition in Norway for the solar eclipse. And so it was, they had fitted an airplane with various scientists, and they had all kinds of recording equipment to do their measurements, and they did catch a UFO. And this even appeared on the BBC News at the time.
It did indeed, and I think one of the important things to recall in a case like this, where you have a legitimate crew out on a scientific mission.
Yeah, they're the clips, you see.
Yeah. That these individuals made a certain choice to go public with this material, which they did not have to do. There is still, as many people know, a tremendous ridicule factor associated with coming forward and saying, I saw a UFO.
And especially in those days.
And especially
now
for professionals. It's softening a bit.
Well, it's softening, yeah. But in those days, it was very difficult for a scientist, a government officer, whatever, to go public. Yeah.
This enhanced footage here I find fascinating, because what we are seeing is two ellipses. They are white. They seem to be moving on the same trajectory, holding the same angle, and, well, basically pacing this conventional aircraft.
Yeah, of course, those smudges that you see, this is characteristic of motion picture footage from the old days.
Oh, and we'll see worse.
Yeah, we'll see worse. And
Before we see better.
Those are not UFOs or anything, but they're just scratches and things on the film.
Exactly.
This is a more controversial one, I guess.
And we're coming into a time now where some of this footage is supplied by people whose names we know in the field. They're part of one of the earliest aspects of UFO studies, generally referred to as the contactee movement.
Right.
Can we trace that from a certain beginning, Antonio?
Yes, I believe that the sort of the father of the contactee movement is George Adamski, in which we will see several footage supposedly taken by him. And he sort of created the tone. There might have been contactees even before Adamski, but they didn't go public. And so Adamski really sort of sets the tone in which you have friendly contact with aliens, and the alien is benign.
Yeah. And that was something that permeated quite a lot of, so to say, ufology through the 1950s and even into the early 60s. Again,
and even beyond. In fact, even today, still in Latin America, for instance, contactees are quite powerful still.
and in fact, we are going to see that footage, in a few hours
we'll
from
see
now.
Diaz and those people, yes.
Exactly.
So even today, it still continues. Though in this country, in the U.S., it's sort of the contactee thing has subsided, and it's been replaced by abductions in terms of the popular, exposure.
And where the attitude is more that this is not a pleasant experience and not one where they're benign aliens necessarily. Okay.
Here we go into the various smudgy ones, I guess.
I think this one may be the one that we were talking about before that really is technically the tiredest and most grainy piece of footage. We will be seeing...
It's practical smudges,
we see those two blips, and we'll be seeing the other... There's two others.
the two blips there,
at the bottom left right now. And what they are, we can't tell. We can get a sense there's some cloud cover in the sky that we're looking up toward.
Yeah, no points of reference, which is the one thing, and this is a good thing we bringing up now in the beginning, this is also for the people who are viewing this program, should they ever get a chance to record a UFO,
figure ground.
Always get a reference point.
Yeah, whether it's the top of a tree or a hillside, a good-shaped cloud, something you can see.
The moon, whatever, yeah.
Now here we have objects seemingly moving in and out from the sides on a strictly horizontal sort of display. Again, no points of fixed reference.
Sometimes it's difficult because if the object is in the middle of the sky and it's all the blue sky, if you want a reference point, then you're going to miss the object.
Exactly.
So I understand that sometimes this is difficult. But if you can, always look for the reference point because that's essential to make measurements and to analyze.
Ray Stanford, he went on to write at least one book that I'm aware of, possibly more.
Socorro Saucer. And he did some other books, but none on UFOs.
And
on
I know he did an
Fatima,
earlier monograph with his brother, Rex.
Right. They were part of the Adamski group, but they later broke with Adamski. And Stanford also wrote some books about the Fatima prophecies and some other subjects. And on UFOs, I think he did basically the Socorro Saucer, the very classic book.
In a Pentagon Pantry.
In a Pentagon Pantry.
Yes, nice yellow book cover.
Funny name. And he later had a project called Starlight International, remember?
Yes.
Project Starlight International in Texas. And he had some funding he was kind of ahead of his time to get all the most updated equipment and try to record UFOs and to even call them and record them.
This one I find quite compelling.
It's a very good footage,
We've got some figure ground in terms of cloud cover. We've got a conventional contrail of an airplane up there. And this is, I mean, it seems it's a little white dot in the sky. What's the big deal? Well, folks,
we'll see plenty of those.
This is a UFO.
And we'll keep seeing them. When we get into the 90s and New Mexico, we'll see hundreds of those little white dots.
Many similar to this.
Here we start with George Adamski.
Now,
and again, the first one is not a particularly controversial. Some of the later ones of Adamski are far more controversial.
Yeah, this fits into more the classic pattern of that moving thing in the sky. We've got some figure groundwork here.
We do have all kinds of reference points.
There we go. This reminds me of that Russian shot that we're going to see.
It's a pretty good film, actually, I have to admit.
Yeah.
Even though I'm traditionally have been somewhat skeptic. I'm fascinated by Adamski as a colorful character, but
absolutely,
I have more trouble, accepting that he really did meet Venusians and things like that.
Fair enough. But again, we are in a situation here where it is the pot calling the kettle black, who is to say what was not another person's experience. And Antonio and I, like anybody, have our own attitudes, points of view, and we're pulling back a bit in the sense of trying to be our own devil's advocates and just look at all of this with a fresh eye.
He deserves a hearing, at least, or a viewing, rather.
This one impresses me tremendously. Look at this thing.
This was used to be shown by the late great Barker, who was one of the early pulp writers, really on the UFO field, and he used to show these at many of his lectures. Also, Jim Moseley used to show them.
I have to say, what impresses me about this piece of footage is we have movement that is almost insect-like. It defies all conventional laws of normal flight. And if this were a fabrication, let's say there's a stick, a string, and a plate, if you stopped, you'd see the movement of the plate. It'd swing out.
Because that's the alternative theory, that it was taken from a car, from a fish cane, a little model hanging. And that's why it's moving so jerkily. At least that's what some people have said.
Yeah, but for me, this one really has impressed me. And again, that movement that is so organic, that would absolutely flatten a conventional pilot against the wall or turn him to pudding, we see here, and covering fairly good expanses of the horizon. Okay, we're coming out of the 50s, I think.
Yeah, I think we're moving to the 60s now.
Back to our favorite planet here.
60s was a very, very active time for UFOs. There were many worldwide flaps. In the United States, the controversy reached such proportion that even the government had to commit the University of Colorado to do a study.
Yeah, 69.
It was released in 69. Blue Book continued till 1969, so still we will see many more Blue Book films.
Now, this is footage that is indicative of a certain type of UFO we'll be seeing on and off over the decades, one that I find fascinating, because when you slow it down...
When they go very fast,
you see the movement that you'd associate with an inchworm. It's small, it's large, it's small, it's large. It's like a dash and a dot, which doesn't seem normal in terms of any flight characteristics of helicopters, airplanes, rockets, missiles, you name it. And Mike's footage here is terrific in that some of it will be slowed down in sequence, whether or not it's on Earth or some of our space shots later on.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one,
Monument Valley.
It goes very, very fast.
So we're going to see it progressively slowed, and once again you'll see that classic inchworm movement. Which
they had to slow it down, because otherwise you can hardly see anything. And there were some studies done about the estimate of the speed, although I don't remember the technical details right now, but this has been looked by various people, and is considered definitely genuine.
I think it's terrific footage.
Daniel Fry, though, he's certainly controversial.
He's also in the contactee movement as such.
His claim to fame is that he was an engineer at White Sands.
Yes.
And that he took a trip to
ground.
New York City in half an hour on a saucer, and then he wrote the famous book, Incident at White Sands.
Right, I remember that one. That's somewhere in both of our libraries.
Now, this one is alleged to be part of almost like a program landing. This according to a researcher and TV producer called Bob Emenegger at the Holloman Air Force Base. Yeah. There's quite a bit of controversy. Because in the Emenegger movie, it's presented as a kind of a scenario. But later the story was that at least part of the footage is real, though we don't know for sure because it hasn't been authenticated by the Air Force.
Exactly, and you can bet the Air Force is not going to authenticate a lot of the footage.
But they had promised it to Emenegger. That was the story, that they had promised him the footage. And then they didn't give it to him, but then apparently they gave him a little bit. And, well, here we are again with Fry, and I have to say that I'm skeptical about this. I cannot hide it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you keep coming up against quandaries, and I think human psychology, when you look at this stuff, dictates that that's just too good to be true.
Yeah.
Okay, the little ones, the little white dots, they're fine, but again,
it does look like a model.
If we weren't there, we weren't there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is definitely one that is, well, the chips are...
Though the book is interesting, the book by
He's a
Fry.
good writer, extremely sincere.
And it comes across sincere.
And that's one of the things that marks a lot of the folks in the contactee movement.
I know.
A tremendous sincerity, as human beings, no scandal, that kind of thing.
They come across sincere, but then some of the tales are very
pretty wild.
Very wild.
But again, I think a lot of our current day abductees, an area that you have a lot of knowledge in and that I've certainly specialized in part over the years, you hear extraordinary things from, in many cases, decent, ordinary people.
Now, here we're back with Adamski. And this, of course, is the most famous of the Adamski films, taken by Madeline Rutherford. But she was, I guess, Adamski was next to her in Silver Spring.
Maryland, yeah.
Right. And then later we will see a close-up. Again, a very, very controversial piece of footage. Yeah. Though some people, like our late dear friend Coleman von Kavinsky,
a tremendous researcher who was really a mentor for both Antonio and
who knew a lot about photography and film, he did accept this film as real.
It's funny too, in the international field of UFO studies, you have many, many well-educated people who take the subject seriously, who devote years to researching them. And one of the great divides is between a lot of American researchers and our European brothers and sisters, characterized in part by the split over Adamski and the contactees, where Americans tend to be more skeptical of the contactee movement, and Europeans, for whatever reasons, tend to take it more seriously.
Well, I'm not so sure. I mean, what happens in Europe, there's a whole school of ufology called psychosociological. There, they take it seriously, but only from a sociological point of view. It's not that they believe
more Jungian
literally in it. Yeah. Although some do, obviously. This is actually the one by Rutherford.
Certainly one of the most controversial bits of footage ever shot on this subject.
Yeah, the movement is, I do have some problems with it. But it's as classic as you can get.
Yeah. And again, many of our colleagues take this as absolutely as authentic as anything we're going to see.
Well, Adamski is very popular still in many parts of the world, for instance, in Japan. In Japan, there's still like 3 Adamski groups, and they treat him like the Bible. Now we get into the NASA footages, and we will be seeing, of course, into all the way to the late 90s.
This is very exciting for me, I must say. Any of you listeners who grew up in the early days of the Apollo program, when we looked at astronauts as heroes, and when we first started to get our first footage from space, as you might imagine, certain anomalies were captured on film.
McDivitt, that was the first probably well-known so-called astronaut UFO sighting.
Yes.
He also took some photographs which are very well known. And They were never really accepted as real UFOs by NASA, but that's to be expected, probably.
Course. Yeah, that was also continuing public relations
Although,
problem for NASA.
as we will talk later on, some astronauts, notably Gordon Cooper, have gone public quite courageously.
Yeah.
Now we're in England. Oh yes,
Very quick sequence. There it goes.
Taken from an airliner, the Oldfield. This is a 16 millimeter movie. And,
here's one of our favorites. C. Hansen, U.S. Navy photographer out on Catalina Island, 26 miles off the coast of California, captured this extraordinary image.
Yeah, also 16 millimeter film.
Yeah, and it is moving on a straight horizontal. Look at that shape. That is your classic ellipse. It's not being subjected by wind. It does not seem in any way to be a balloon or a lighter-than-air
there was
object.
one interpretation that it was an aircraft, though it doesn't look to me like an aircraft.
On those close-ups, I have to say, this is, for me, a terrific capture of an unidentified. Fred Steckling.
Fred Steckling, who was a German pilot who later settled in San Diego, and he was a follower of Adamski.
Also an author.
Wrote a well-known book about aliens on the moon, or something like that. And here's one piece of footage. Formation, perhaps.
This is our first bit of Soviet footage. We'll have more as we go on.
There'll be some more later. Of course, back in the 60s, UFOs were completely
politically
censored.
incorrect.
Yes, complete. In fact, even the term UFO could not be used because Pravda, as you remember in a famous article, said that was a capitalist term.
We've got to think of our own socialist term.
So they had to use anomalous atmospheric phenomena and things like that. Of course, when Gorbachev came, that changed.
It did indeed. Gorbachev took UFOs quite seriously. Here's a great
This
clip.
is a great one, yeah.
Look at your lower left-hand corner. There it goes, heading toward the cowboy's neck. It's so light.
This is for an advertisement for
It's a Marlboro ad.
Right.
You bet.
The cowboy.
You see it come out toward the middle of the screen on the right side, and there it is. And again, it's moving along on a diagonal trajectory.
Yeah.
Truly anomalous, and just one of those moments.
Anomalous and politically incorrect.
Smoking. Bad for you, kids. Don't do it.
This also contactee kind of oriented guy, Joe Ferrier, I think was his name, from Rhode Island. Cigar-shaped.
Very traditional in the lore, and we'll see a number of tubular-shaped unknowns.
Yeah.
Again, their disposition we can only comment on, and unfortunately, experts in this field can't do the hard turns that you can in a lot of other areas of natural science and research. Best we can do is say, I don't know what that is by any conventional standards.
Could be a model, suspended from the
tree. It could be anything, or it could be what it appears. Oh boy, here we go again.
Now we go into the Apollo program, because previously we had seen the Gemini program.
Right.
These first ones, though, I believe they are lens flares.
You may well be right. I don't know. And at the same time, this would not be an uncommon kind of phenomenon to catch off a glass. But make no mistake about it, some of the material we're going to see here
on the NASA photo, there were many lens flares, but what you'll see now is definitely not a lens flare.
Stuff. Now, you had told me yesterday, Antonio, that the astronauts themselves coined a term for this phenomena.
I don't know if it was the astronauts or later people at Lockheed who did, who analyzed a lot of the footage. Moon bug.
I love it.
Because they're very small.
Now, let's look at this, folks. It is a white
and
thing.
You'll see various of them.
It's moving like a satellite, but there are no artificial satellites moving over the surface of the moon.
And also, we should clarify that all these NASA footage that you will be seeing throughout this program,
totally authentic. Released through NASA.
Maybe we can debate as to what it shows, but there's no controversy, even by the most archy skeptics, that it's a bogus footage. It came from NASA files. It's part of the space program.
It surely did, and make no mistake about it, that is not a meteorite about to crash into the moon.
I don't think so. No. It's very small, as you can tell.
But there it is between the surface of the capsule.
Yeah, and the limb. I think that's what you're seeing, because that's why you see the full
lunar
module from the guy who stayed, orbiting the moon. Here you'll see like a sort of a little dance, I believe, between these little objects, whatever they are.
And again, we're looking through.
Yeah, this is grainy, but
There's something
eventually you
going
do
on
see
out
them.
there.
Yeah, there
Now,
they are.
we are going to see some
Yeah, look
shots
at that.
looking toward Earth as opposed to the moon later on, where you'll see a similar phenomena. And in that case, it is the way a good lightning storm will register from space. These little...
Yeah.
But this is not that.
No, this
at
is all from the moon. This is all part of the Apollo footage. So there's no...
Maybe there's fireflies in space and they wear little suits and hold their breaths.
Practically no atmosphere on the moon, although now I think they concede that there's maybe a very thin atmosphere.
Yeah.
Adamski, oddly enough, talked about the moon having an atmosphere.
That's an interesting configuration. What it is, we don't know.
Let's see what comes now. More NASA.
Apollo 12, the one right before the famous one where Tom Hanks went into space.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah, this is one of the better ones
That's a
of,
beauty.
Of these types of moon bugs. There you see it in slow motion.
Go, baby. Now, that's not that far in the big picture over the moon. I think we're about to leave the 60s here.
Yeah.
Goodbye, moon.
And we'll move on to the 70s.
Right, and this is the decade where we start to see some video footage, obviously.
Towards the end of the 70s,
Right.
yes. But really
Cameras were expensive, they
yeah.
were bulky.
And exactly, they were bulky. They were
most of
not,
the time-
not easily available,
No.
not affordable.
And some of the early video footage we're going to see is, camera or television footage.
Yeah, because even TV, they used to use motion pictures in the early days.
Okay, again, this is shot by...
Oh, this is the one in England. I believe that there was an explanation for this, that it was some kind of high-altitude refueling. I'm not saying that's
But that sequence
the truth.
right
I'm
there.
just saying that was an explanation offered at
What
the time.
interested me about this was that we see the contrail seemingly go and disappear, and then the craft, or whatever is generating, goes back the other way.
Well, because in refueling you have two aircraft and connected each other, but I don't know. I'm just saying that's one explanation that was offered. This is a...
I like this one.
I like this one too, yes.
We really get to spend, Peter Dale here, the photographer, fixed on an object, moving on a horizontal line. You see archetypal site in England, low woods.
Yeah, this is what we were talking at the beginning. Here it's perfect, you have all kinds of reference points. Beautiful shot in that sense.
And back we go to it. Now, again, I really don't think that fits the profile of a conventional aircraft.
Yeah, playing devil's advocate, you could say maybe an aircraft under, heavy weather conditions or something.
Maybe.
But
Maybe not.
maybe not.
And Dale stays with this for a good amount of time, so we do have a chance to really follow it and see that it is not being blown around. It doesn't seem to be exhibiting any of the characteristics of a blimp or anything. Okay.
Oh, this is, I'm familiar with this one. Actually, it's taken not in San Juan, but in Santurce. It's another city in Puerto Rico. And this was for a commercial where they had a fixed camera, and they left the film shooting all night because they wanted to do the sunlight, the sunset, and then the
time lapse.
Yeah, and there it comes above. And unfortunately, the camera was fixed and there was nobody there. So the object incredibly appeared right in front of the camera, but then since there was no cameraman, they couldn't follow it up.
Exactly.
But even the fact that we have it is very good. And you also see some aircraft going by.
Yeah, we
That
have
way
something to compare
you
it
can
to.
compare. Which is particularly good on UFO footage when you do see aircraft too, because then you can compare both objects, and it kind of really expands.
Yeah, look at the glow there.
It's a very interesting video. Yeah. Definitely very, very interesting. I forgot what it was a commercial for.
Imagine their surprise when they
For
checked
something.
out the footage the next morning.
That's how it happened. Yeah, when they checked the footage, and I guess he made it on the news in Puerto Rico eventually, and I don't know whether it was used on the commercial or not, but it's the best footage that I've seen from Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And there have been many, many cases in Puerto Rico, but not so much.
Increasingly so.
We have photography, yes, but I haven't seen many videotapes.
This is our first bit of French footage. It'll go by very fast. As I recall, it's going to be on the right there. There it is, whatever it is. a white ellipse of some sort, and then it sort of goes into the area where it's really too bright to make out any detail.
Yeah.
You know, you pays your money and you takes your chances. What is it? We're not sure.
Oh, now we're getting into Billy Meyer, who, after Adamski, is probably the best-known contactee.
I think so. And he emerged in the earlier 70s,
Right.
Alleging a history of sightings from his area.
And claiming that he had contact with a female, very benign and good-looking astronaut.
Very much in the old contactee
from the
theme.
Pleiades, calls them Yase.
I think for many of us in the field, Meyer divides us in half. Many folks feel that this is absolutely unauthentic, and other people that we've met, spent time with, decent, intelligent people, swear that they've witnessed this stuff along with Meyer. I must say, one of the things that is always a hallmark of his his movie film that we've seen is that it is quite elegant, and he has a real sense of camera work, no question about that.
Yeah, that can be said of Meyer. The photographs are
Well,
striking.
that book of stills that came out,
They're very beautiful.
and I think even for the hardest-nosed of us, the ones that are the most skeptical, there's a part of us that sort of hopes they're real because they're amazing. Whether or not they are, I think, is probably as controversial as anything going on in contemporary UFO
This is
studies.
as controversial as it gets,
Yeah.
and I definitely have a lot of problems with
Yeah.
it. I mean, if someone took the trouble of flying all the way from the Pleiades to Switzerland and allowed itself to be photographed and filmed, couldn't they do better? You know, I mean...
Maybe, maybe not. We don't know.
But I know that, you know, for many people, not just in the contactee groups, but also even in the New Age literature, the Pleiadians have become almost a dogma. But we still have to look at things scientifically and see if the evidence is there or not.
Indeed.
In any case, yeah.
Makes me want to visit Switzerland, I must say.
The movement of the object does not convince me.
Again, we may be dealing with a situation where some footage is absolutely authentic, other is questionable. As a total devil's advocate at the moment, I'm going to remain open-minded on this, but some of it is troubling, and at the same time, having spoken to people who I believe are of decent character and, you know, the right stuff, so to say, who have sworn to me that they have seen these things with Meyer, we're sort of stuck with, you know, a controversial mystery in this sense. And it is one that will continue to divide researchers, I'm sure, for some time to come.
Yeah, well, also the problem with Meyer, I haven't seen independent analysis of the footage that pronounces it bona fide. There has been some analysis done by people who believe in him.
Yeah. In fact, there was some published in that first book of his.
Yes, but mostly people who are believers in Meyer. So I haven't seen independent analysis, and a lot of the ufologists who look at some of this footage, including our friend Coleman Bonkevinsky and Bruce Maccabee and so on, do not endorse it. But
now, this is one that Antonio and I are a bit divided on. I'm quite convinced this is a real unknown, but you had said that there was a documentary that you had seen that explained this quite convincingly.
I don't remember the details, the technical details. I'll have to review the documentary, but it was a film called UFO where I forgot if you were interviewed. Certainly Larry was, Larry Warren, your co-author of your Ben Waters book, and they went into quite a bit of explanation. They didn't say it was a hoax. They said it was some kind of technical problem with the camera, an artifact. What in videography and photography is called an artifact, meaning that it's something extemporaneous. It's not there. It's not the same usage of the in popular term. You know.
Well, I must say,
but it's certainly interesting.
The innocent, open-minded part of myself loves this one.
Well, yeah, it's striking because you have the Concorde. I believe this was taken maybe
initially. This is one of its first
for a promotional film, I think.
We see whatever it is seemingly drop down, come back, parallel it for a few seconds and take off to the upper right.
What we would have to know here, and again, I don't know who took the camera or anything, is whether the guy who shot also saw the object or not, you know. Now, this one, I do know the details because I interviewed one of the people who were present. This was one of the very first video cameras. They were done by Sony, the very first models for commercial use. And it was they were filming an advertisement for Volkswagen in Guatemala City when suddenly this object appeared. And of course the camera, you know, then they follow the object. It's very good footage. It shows a lot of reference points. It gets into the trees, then leaves the trees.
There we go.
This was considered so good that it was even shown as one of the items, one of the exhibits in the United Nations hearings on UFOs when the government of Grenada convened them in 1978.
Which I had the great pleasure and honor of attending. 3 days of the most remarkable.
And it was shown by Dr. Heineck from CUFOS.
And that was shortly before we met, actually.
Right.
Okay, here we are in New Zealand. Now, this is, you'll hear on the actual audio track, is a legitimate flight where they were going up to document that there had been flights.
What happened is there had been sightings on a previous flight. It made the news in New Zealand because Australia and New Zealand were having a UFO wave at the time.
In fact, this is about 6 weeks within one of the most famous cases,
case,
a pilot disappearing.
Disappeared. So then the TV camera from Channel 0, I think it was, from Australia, went on the plane only to recreate, you know, like to film and say, well, here's the pilot and here's the crew, but they weren't expecting to actually get a UFO.
Yeah.
And they did. They lucked out, and it's quite long. The full footage runs for about 14 minutes, although some of it doesn't show the UFO or whatever.
Sure.
The complete
We
footage.
have several minutes of the best footage here, and let's remember we're looking at professional filming against a night sky.
This were professional cameramans, of
It
course,
is a
for
fixed
a
camera.
TV program.
Even in a plane, we're not dealing with a lot of handheld shaking.
And everybody saw it. The pilot saw it. There were even a couple of books written about this case. Very, very
available as
famous.
imports.
Made the news, even on Walter Cronkite.
It
I
did
remember.
indeed.
And it was later, a very thorough analysis was done by Dr. Bruce Maccabee, an optical physicist who was a research scientist with the U.S. Navy. And this was perhaps his first really famous case, which he really sank his teeth on to and worked very, very hard.
Here we have a
you
much
even
larger refraction of
You
it.
even see a definition at some point of the shape.
The movement, of course, again...
Well, this is because the plane is moving, everything is moving, so...
I guess we have to, you know, just sort of visualize the movement as somewhere between what we're seeing and compensating, you know, for the plane's movement. But this thing is in action, and we're coming up to a frame here where what has happened
when it does,
is in a single frame of movie film. And think about this for a minute. They capture what looks like a full figure 8. Now, even doing some rudimentary math here, where you're dealing with 8 to 15 frames a second, to capture something moving so fast that in a single frame of film it delivers a full figure 8, would splash a conventional pilot against the wall of the plane and turn into jello. There it is.
There it is.
And wham, that's
of course,
one frame.
Let's not forget, this is very funny, the explanation by Phil Klass, the famous debunker, who said basically what the pilots were seeing and the TV was filming were the lights from Japanese squid boats.
Right.
I love
and
that
that the pilots were too naive to know that they were looking out, but they were really looking down.
Yeah, and besides, these pilots were flying constantly over that area, so they would have seen the Japanese squid boats previously. Now, this happened 3 days later.
Yeah.
Also on the same Kaikoura coast of New Zealand.
And that same archetypal white.
Yeah, although at the time, even Maccabee and Heineck and other people said that this was Venus. But then what you'll see is as the cameraman starts zooming, then the sky will become darker.
Great, yeah.
And then towards the end, you actually do seem to see some definition on the
Yeah.
shape. Because here, yes, this could be Venus because it's not moving.
It could be, and it's extremely bright in the day sky and pretty large even for Venus. Again,
But sometimes Venus has
it can.
fooled a lot
You're
of people.
absolutely right, and there's no question about that. This one, though, I certainly feel is authentic, but like so much of the footage that we're seeing, bottom line is unknown.
Right. And yeah, here's where
Ah.
here's where you see the
Little concentric ring work in
Unless
there.
it was a distortion,
Yeah.
but otherwise it does look like two concentric rings.
It does indeed, and this is a professional
this is
camera.
also taken by TV cameramen. Yes.
Okay, back to Japan here. This, as I recall, also is a fairly... Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is one where it is certainly possible, given the way that high-altitude balloons sort of are elongated. We may be looking up at something elongated, or we may be looking at a more tubular-shaped, unknown craft. This one, we just don't know in part because of the play of the angles. Are we looking at something foreshortened, or is that the actual shape? Are we looking up at it, so to say, directly, or kind of out at it at an angle?
Right. Yeah, again, to really do a proper analysis of any footage, not only you have to see it, but you have to interview the cameraman or the
If possible,
photographer.
computer enhancement.
And go to the place and do measurements, and it's very time-consuming.
Now, this is the first of several films by this fellow Martin D.,
Yeah.
and we don't know much about him.
I suspect he's some kind of contactee because then he's got so many footage, but I'm sure our friend Hesseman will know all about him.
Yeah. Also, I think in looking at this as fairly as we can, if you have had an experience like this and have been, if the word is fortunate enough to capture it on camera, it can certainly change your habits of leaving the house with a camera. So that it does not dismiss the credibility of something that they've had multiple.
Not necessarily. In the old days, they used to.
For sure.
But
the
now
same way that
with
with the abduction phenomena, it was first thought if you had it happen,
Right.
it's like winning a bad lottery,
Yeah.
and now we see patterns.
You were
where
supposed to only have
it
one
repeats.
experience. If
Right.
you had two, already that disqualified you.
and
But
three, you're a darn liar.
that has changed. And it was probably unfair. I'm sure it was unfair, but that used to be the prevailing view for many, many years.
Another elongated image.
From the
again,
same fellow, yes.
no figure ground.
Yeah.
It looks like either night sky or dusk, near as I can tell, and on to the next.
And still more.
Yeah, one or two more, I think.
Yeah, he's also, I think he's taken many photographs.
Now, I have to say, as a youngster, the thing that got me interested in this subject was a rather remarkable daylight sighting I had with one of my sisters. And what we saw was very much like what we're seeing here against a daylight sky, but with 5 discs in a very precise, almost military formation. So maybe I've got a soft spot in my heart for V's.
Still
but
more.
I think this is the last one by him. Let's see what this one is. Okay, rather... there we are.
Oh yeah, this
This
in
is
my
fairly
opinion,
long.
this is the best of
It is.
the Martin Hagen films.
I do like this
This is more convincing than some of the previous ones, and it's a good footage of cigar shape or
Yeah.
cylindrical
Let's
shape.
remember, too, that we know that we are dealing with something that we can only theorize about. If there is such a thing as machines visiting this planet from far-off universes or planets or galaxies, as I certainly feel is the case, they probably don't run on coal or gasoline.
I don't think so, right?
And so that we don't have to almost encumber ourselves with worrying about lack of wings, obviously. The classic saucer shape dispels that. So that it is not out of the question in any sense, if one opens one's mind, that we are dealing with propulsion systems that could easily maneuver a so-called unconventional object, one that in the sky, in terrestrial terms, we'd only be familiar with in terms of blimps, zeppelins, dirigibles, or,
Right.
a scaled-up version of a child's balloon. But this thing is not caught up in the wind.
This is none of that.
This one is
it's not a blimp.
very
no.
interesting.
So
I like it a lot. Even when you're pretty hardcore like we are, there is a sense of wonder that keeps coming back and hitting you at different points. like, my God, this is a genuine unknown phenomena we're dealing with. And Antonio and I were talking before about when we started, more or less, we're focused on, are they extraterrestrial? And now it's more, are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers from our future, another dimension?
I think
we both have gotten to the point where we're not really preoccupied
maybe
with that.
we're lumping also many things under the category of UFO.
I think that's
and most
fair.
people tend to think it has to be one thing. So if they're extraterrestrial, they're not dimensional. If they're dimensional, they're not. And they get these huge fights in the UFO community. Whereas perhaps we've got a multitude of different phenomena happening.
Must say,
from
I've come
the
to feel
natural to the, totally extraterrestrial or whatever, or certainly intelligence of some kind. Well, here we go into probably one of the most controversial, even for Billy Meyer, because the shape of this object is...
it doesn't seem aerodynamic.
No, it doesn't look
but
too
again,
practical to me.
We are imposing our own physics on things that may be
Well, that is
unknown,
true.
but-
Maybe the Pleiadians have other technologies. Certainly, if there are really Pleiadians coming here, they would have far more advanced technology. But I just have a hard time with this one.
Yeah. And again, back to that idea of what are they, where are they from? In the years of working on the book Left at East Gate, documenting what is a seminal case in British UFO history, I found my attitudes just sort of melting down a bit. Are they from one place or another? You know what? It doesn't really matter to me that much at this point. We're dealing with an extraordinary phenomena, seemingly intelligent, that has hardware that we can hardly even dream about, although, of course, part of the legend and myth and lore of UFO studies is we are now piloting our own UFOs, so to say the term back-engineered. Is that a Lazar term?
I believe that came from Lazar. It might be a term used in intelligence, let's say when they capture a MiG jet or something, and then I don't know. I think it is a term used even before Lazar for non-UFO matters. But certainly Lazar popularized it in the UFO field.
I think for a lot of people it's, oh, well, how can that be? But let's face it, if these things are real, they may occasionally be subject to their own mechanical problems, come down. And if they do, and we get them, you can bet we'd take them down to the hairpins and try to figure out what makes them work.
If someone made an apparatus that flies, then it probably can crash, no matter how advanced it is, because there's going to be some circumstance where this thing can crash. Of course, Meyer got a boost from the Lazar allegations because even though Lazar never talked about Pleiadians, but he talked about the sports model.
Right, and we are talking about a gentleman named Bob Lazar, who allegedly was involved as a scientist at Area 51 in Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada.
Lake, right.
Goes by a number of names.
Who is extremely controversial too.
He is in himself, you betcha.
So anyway, he claimed that he worked on these spacecraft, which they were nicknamed the sports model, and one of which looks identical to the Pleiadian. Now, this, on the other hand, this is not a controversial. This is well-established case.
With many, many witnesses, just north of New York City, if you're not familiar with Westchester.
The Hudson Valley flap, which went basically from 1982 into the late 80s. I mean, there's still some cases, but not a wave.
It was intense. In fact, about this time, you and I were up in Westchester.
I remember very much that big conference. I remember 2,000 people.
It was the one time I met Dr. Hynek.
Uh-huh.
Okay, here we go, back above the Earth here.
Now, the moon days are gone now, and now you will be seeing many more NASA footages, but all taken by the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And this is a very odd one, and I have no explanation whatsoever.
Yeah, let's watch closely.
And unfortunately, unless they are pressed, as it happened on the STS-44, which we'll see later.
Yeah. Oh, look at that.
NASA usually does not volunteer an explanation.
That is one of my favorites, though. That is definitely something. Okay. This is one of the few that is not dated.
Yeah.
And it's one that both of us we don't know what to really make of it.
Yeah, it's in some sense similar to some photographs, like the Lubbock lights.
Yes,
famous photograph from 1951.
A U or a V-shaped formation of lights. It looks like it's several generations old from the
only thing I could suggest, it was some kind of formation of aircraft, but we don't know anything about it.
Now, this is our first bit of footage by Ed Walters. I think there are several entries by him in this.
No, I'm not sure that they're by Walters, but we will see certainly many in Gulf Breeze.
From the Gulf Breeze area, which is in Florida, and which has an extremely high incidence of well-observed unknowns in the sky.
Right, in which the popularity or the fame of the Gulf Breeze area was started by Walters with a series of very striking but also controversial Polaroid photographs.
And his book was the Gulf Breeze...
Sightings.
Okay, yeah.
His first book, yes.
Right.
But later we will see some other videotapes taken. Even if you do not believe in Walters, there are many other footage taken in Gulf Breeze that has nothing to do with Walters.
Yes, indeed.
This is the first one from Israel, and we will be seeing many more.
And if you happen to be fluent in Hebrew and you listen to the track, you will hear the actual people that are standing there commenting. If you're like us and you're not fluent in Hebrew, listen to the tone of voice. There is a pitch that is universal in people capturing images like this. Tremendous amount of excitement, sometimes anxiety, trepidation.
Foul vocabulary often.
Nervous laughter. You are sincerely in the presence of people who feel that they are experiencing something extraordinary, and in fact they are. Whatever it is,
oh yeah, when we get to
them.
the late 90s, we will be seeing some. I had, even myself, after 20 years, I had never seen such weird craft as the stuff we will see from Israel that Mike Hesseman has come up with. Really weird stuff.
I know our colleague Dr. David Jacobs out of Temple University, a respected scholar who champions, again, some of the more controversial points of view, but who has approached it through very careful scholarship.
Well, he did his PhD thesis on Blue Book, on the history of the UFO controversy in America.
And it came out as a brilliant book, and I wish it would go into reprint.
It was so well done that it became a commercial book, even though it was a PhD thesis. This is a second one now from Gulf Breeze.
Yes, now,
and, this is very, very strange. I have been familiar with this footage for many years now.
At different times as lecturers, both Antonio and I have stood on this stretch of beach and skywatched with our friends. What we are seeing here, I just think is amazing. What these things do is not static at all, either. When the photographer pulls back, you'll be able to see, there it is, in lower frame, that is waves breaking on the beach.
And you will see that the objects start multiplying. Now it begins with 2, now you see 3, and it will go on and on. This tape goes for a few minutes.
Yeah, and then they disappear again.
At the end, they disappear. So
here we come with number 4. And I must say, it must be very exciting to be having a sighting like this, especially with other people. I think it's almost a curse to have something like this happen to you while you're all alone. There's no way to communicate.
Yeah, you see? And you see them appearing, which is very, very unusual.
Yeah.
Well, actually, later on, in a lot of the footage from Mexico and elsewhere, we will see also, but not as clear as this one, though. We will also see sequences of little balls, and they start also kind of multiplying. But in here, they're so luminous that they
there is
clearly see them appearing.
Ambiguous at all about this material. Look at that. There goes another one. And let us again recall that we have to begin by knowing we know nothing about what the heck is really going on out there. There may be mechanical situations going on that we are not capable of. It may be an object that has been sitting there that simply lights up on cue.
Yeah.
We don't know. One, two.
There's always, at least for some people, the government hypothesis as well, because Gulf Breeze is near very large
Pensacola Naval Base,
exactly, and the Eglin Air Force Base
and
too.
it's very easy to just say anything like this is military special, tests and top secret stuff, black projects, you name it.
Could be though,
and some of it may well be, of course.
Some of it may well be. Though on the other hand, if it's a very black project, they would not do it in a public area.
I don't think
for
so.
that, they do have Area 51.
Sure.
When people people tell me about UFO sightings in Area 51, well, then you're expected to see weird stuff because that's where they test.
Area 51, again, part of the Nellis Air Force Base complex by Groom Lake. That's about 80 miles or so, I believe, south of Las Vegas. Has been used for research, development, advanced weapons tests, and advanced aircraft. It was one of the places where our SR-71, the Blackbird,
the stealth fighter,
the stealth, as well as our original U-2.
Yeah, they were all tested.
And
it's a very remote area. Yeah. It's a desert and mountain area.
And now it's become a tourist spot.
Well, now they have even the extraterrestrial highway and everything, which you actually see in the beginning, in the credits.
Yes, that's not a fake sign, folks. So you'll see it when it comes up again.
No, that was officially inaugurated by the governor of Nevada and everything.
Good move.
Well, they were already getting so many tourists that I guess he decided to go along, and it helps to prop the economy of Nevada.
Indeed. I think we're about to start seeing these retracting.
Yeah,
there
now,
goes the middle
exactly.
one.
They came, and now they kind of begin to fade out.
Bye, guys. Okay, Rio.
Yeah, well, Brazil, it's always been a very, very active spot for UFOs.
This goes pretty quick, as I recall.
Even since the 40s. In the 50s, you had very famous waves and photographs taken in.
And also a comparable contactee movement, correct?
Correct. Also, there's well, it's a very exuberant country, and there's a big sort of native spiritualist movement.
Yes.
You know, the
almost a cross between Catholicism and
the
African
religious animist, and it's also blended very well with the alien beliefs too. It's all blended up in one big mix, you know, for better or worse.
Now, this one looks a little bit familiar.
It's interesting.
That one seems to have some real dimension. This is great that we have a photographer that pulls back, gives us a wide frame, then locks us back into this.
Yeah, the guy knows how
light.
to do it, and this is something that people should try to do if they're in a similar situation. Get the broader view and then
focus in.
Focus. And also when you do focus, try not to get out of focus, because people get so excited that they over zoom, and
make sure you have that cassette in your camera before you start filming.
And when you over zoom, you know, you'll get all kind of distortions.
And the easiest thing
we'll
to
see
imagine
some of them
is
later.
Somebody getting very excited and blowing a great photographic opportunity.
It's understandable. Yeah.
Big city.
Well, Rio de Janeiro. Yeah.
You've been there, right?
I've been there. Yes. It's over 10 million people.
Wow. That's bigger than our own fair city of New York.
Oh, probably 12 or something by now. Who knows? It's a very large place. Yes, I gave some UFO lectures there back in around 1986.
That is very intriguing.
Yeah, it looks, you know, first you think, well, it's the moon, but then when you get the close-up, it does not look like the moon. It's not moving, though, but like many of these footages, I just don't know what to make of it.
Sometimes that's the best thing we can say. We don't know what it is.
It's nice to explain something, but if you can, you know, but you have to always be realistic also on the explanations. If they fit the facts, then fine. But if you're stretching the facts in order to explain something, then that's really not scientific either.
Oh, indeed.
And it's very common. Unfortunately, many people will stretch the facts to explain something from which they're uncomfortable with.
Yeah, it's one of really the hallmarks of what separates, for me, the most credible people in our field from ones who are kind of gadflies or cultists or mystify this material tremendously. There seems to be a need in the human psyche to explain and understand everything we see.
Right.
And the fact is, we live in a world with a lot of mysteries. And sometimes understanding is the booby prize. Oh, that's it.
Yeah, I think this is a short one.
That's,
and it is odd.
Again, it's not a comet or something. It's moving up.
Yeah. No, definitely not a comet.
Another bit of Japanese footage coming up.
Yeah, well, of course, the Japanese manufacture the cameras, so...
They've got them.
They do have and there are even many more footages that are not in this collection, but I've been in Japan several times because I did some projects there, including even involving UFOs. And in fact, some of the Japanese cameramen that we'll see later in this various tapes, I met them personally, and we'll discuss them when we get to that.
Well, there's also no question that the Japanese overall have a tremendous interest in this. Like
Oh,
many
they love the
Americans.
phenomenon. They even have a museum, although it's mostly space, but it's called the Cosmo Aile Hakui. It's in the city of a small city called Hakui. And the museum itself is shaped like a flying saucer. And like I said, most of it is space vehicles, you know, from the Russian and American programs. But they do have a section on UFOs, and they do have archives.
Isn't there even a UFO political party?
Yes, correct. In Japan, they have what they call the mini parties, mini issue parties. They have one for sports and, you know, feminism and whatever. And they do have one for UFOs. I met the guy. It's called the Japan UFO Political Party.
Can you imagine
And,
how that would divide American politics?
Well, some people have tried here. They've done rallies in front of the White House and things like that. But the Japanese are a little better organized in that sense. And they say, well, let's go with what the system offers. And they did create this party. Of course, the guy was trying to get elected to the Diet. The Diet is not something to eat, but it's a Congress, right? The Parliament of Japan. And unfortunately, he didn't get elected, though. But he did get a lot of exposure, and I think that was his original goal.
Well, also people like us heard about it. I mean, it was international news for folks in the field, and maybe a model for some of the future in politics.
And it's just pretty interesting footage, this one, actually.
Yeah.
Because here we see, the Russians coined this term called polymorphism,
Right.
which basically means an object changing shape. And that's a pretty good example of that. And it's rare to get it on camera.
Here's this another fixed camera view. This is a security camera, and watch what's going to fly by here.
Right.
It's almost egg-shaped.
Yeah, there's several of these. Later we'll see one, even a weather camera.
Fascinating.
Same thing. More from Japan.
There we go. That is not a UFO. That is a Japanese channel.
Nor an alien.
No. Okay.
Here you see the people obviously pointing.
All right.
Oh yeah, this is known as the Hamazaki video. It's quite well known. It's one of the best known of the Japanese videos. I think Bruce Maccabee did quite a bit of analysis of that one.
Okay, Mexico. Coming into the end of the 80s here.
Yeah, Tepoztlan, an area in central Mexico where there has been many sightings, and it's also the place where this contactee, Carlos Diaz, lives.
Right, who I last heard speak at the United Nations. I guess that was about 2 years ago.
Yeah,
you
it
know,
was
their
actually
annex.
outside the church connected to the United Nations.
Right.
But this is not taken by him, though.
No,
This is,
and this is more in the form of the ones we've been seeing, where we have an elliptical object, not being subject to the will of the wisp of the wind, not moving like a conventional airplane, no seeming appendages. Although, again, if an aircraft is coming straight at you,
yeah, well, and
it
we see
can
two
seem
things,
that.
right? And we see that bar
Lower left.
up there, too.
Yeah. Definitely two. Okay, back to Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, yeah, that area is also a lot of footage.
There we are.
Yeah,
dead center.
these little white balls,
Whoa.
there are many of them.
That's moving
and
out.
we will see many more as we go through this collection.
And even just that graininess of the clouds is enough to give us something to read the object against. Later in the evening, obviously, upper right. No, two of them. One, there it is.
Yeah,
upper left.
especially if they're moving, and if they're moving, you know,
Whoa.
In some unusual way, it's indicative of something with intelligent control, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, if it's just wavering, then you're more inclined towards the balloon hypothesis.
Or unintelligent control.
Right.
Okay, right over the mountainside now. Good. Pulling back a bit. Something else
It's
coming
pretty-
in.
It's a long one.
Yeah.
Yeah. they're suddenly doing all kinds of movements. You see that type of movement going.
Small one seemingly coming out
A
toward the
balloon
right of
wouldn't
the
do that.
large
A
one?
balloon
No.
just wavers on the air, floats in the air.
Absolutely at the...
And I believe that some footage that we will see later might be these little silvery balloons. So you have to be very attentive as to what the object does. You know?
Yeah. Now, we've got a larger object. Is that a conventional aircraft?
Yeah.
It sure is. There you go, something to see it
Yeah,
against.
that helps.
Yeah. Definitely gives us something to compare it to. Our photographer is seeming to close in. There we go.
Yeah, he's also making a good job in keeping the reference points.
Yes.
He's
Whoa.
obviously aware of that.
Look at that.
Yeah, very good.
Terrific. Terrific. Now, that isn't a helicopter. That is not a plane. We don't have anything that quite moves like that.
Not to my knowledge.
And they do seem to be in, I don't know, it's more intuitive, but some relationship. The other one came in very close to the initial one and doing it again there.
I mean, we don't know what the military has in terms of classified stuff, but then again, why would they test it over Las Vegas when only 80 miles from there they have
A little privacy.
mountains and mountains where airplanes are not allowed to fly over it. They've even confiscated these public lands where people, Freedom Ridge and so on, where people used to go and
A lot
take.
of folks are not happy about that.
So.
And it brings up a very important question. Again, when you read the documents on this DVD, you will find yourself asking, to some degree or another, who owns the truth in this country? Who owns the truth about this? It is certainly not we the people. To a degree, if these things are real machines from other planets, whatever, the population of the world is being treated like children. And the governments at certain levels are privy to information that either they don't feel we can handle, the economy could handle, theology, social structure, you name it.
Well, I think what happened in the beginning is understandable.
Yes.
The UFO phenomenon fell under the arena during the Cold War and during
Surely.
the worst period of the Cold War.
Just at the beginning.
So we can now be critical about it, but and that time is understandable because each side wanted to get advantage over the other side.
I couldn't agree more, and if the mythology proves to be true, which I think it may well, that Harry Truman initiated a study group and put together the best minds he could, I would have done the same thing in his place. I think this is the last one here. And this one, for both of us, is quite poignant, and it is a Soviet music video.
Tbilisi in Georgia, which at that time was still part of the Soviet Union.
Well, this is 89, the year that the Soviet Union is actually crumbling. And what I found...
It's opening up more than crumbling. 91 crumbles. So now Georgia is an independent country.
It is indeed.
To some extent, at least. But it is poignant, yes.
It is a good example of a location situation where all of a sudden attention is drawn to something in the sky. I was quite touched by the fact that this young woman is wearing what I am sure at the time was perceived as sort of a fashionable outfit that seems a little threadbare to the Western eyes.
Right, but I think she was a popular,
yes,
well-known singer.
It's actually it's a nicer, it's a memorable tune. And what's going on here is that the camera goes back to the crowd. We see that their attention is on the sky where they had been there to, watch this filming of this video.
It takes a little, because obviously the cameraman is hired to film her, right? Yeah. But at one point, there's so much excitement in the crowd.
He just goes right to the crowd and then right to the sky, and we'll be following in a minute.
I guess she doesn't even realize what's going on yet.
Not at this point,
but
or
eventually
she's just holding her mark very well. And of course, that changes once we get to the end.
Yeah, this, of course, what people that got this DVD now, they can see the full footage because this has been shown in many documentaries, but only like 5 seconds of it, and the later part where you actually see the UFO. Mm-hmm. But here you see the whole event as it unfolded. Yeah.
We've got the crowd milling.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
See. Again, the same type of little white balls that...
And again, also, a lot of good figure ground references. In fact, this is a case where the power wires act as part of your figure ground, and you do see the movement, you can measure it.
We'll see many others too, from Chile, among other places, where you do see the little object coming behind the power wires, and it's great. It helps to analyze the film too.
Okay,
A good shot there of the
somewhat
the
arty
singer, yeah.
But I think we're coming. There we go.
Yeah, here the crowd is really getting excited
And
now.
the cameraman's about to. There we go.
And,
breaking ranks.
Finally, the cameraman, decides
There we
to
go.
explore what's going on.
And again,
in
let's-
more detail,
Yeah.
because before I guess he felt obligated. He had to keep on the singer, but
Plus, let's remember that whatever is in the sky there is unconventional looking enough in reality. Forget about the film. That this huge group of people, that's where their attention's drawn.
Also, I remember it very well because, as you know, I even published a book about, it was an anthology of cases in what was still the Soviet Union.
A very good one. I wish it would go back into print.
And yeah, unfortunately, it's out of print. And 1989 was really sort of the defining year for UFOs in the old USSR, which, as we discussed earlier, had been censored for many years. Then when Gorbachev came and Glasnost, it opened up, but it was still kind of a little hush-hush. And then in 1989, we had the famous Voronezh case, and I remember you were in touch with one of the scientists who investigated that. And that was an incredible explosion.
That blew it open, you bet.
And it really blew open the phenomenon, both internally, and also made even the rest of the world aware that there was this thing going on in Russia now, that UFOs were not exclusive to the West.
It's true. And now we
Japan.
know from declassified Russian documents, Soviet documents
yes,
that are now in the public
We
realm.
have some KGB documents now too, declassified.
One of the great ironies was that in the early 50s, as you will see going through your document collection on this DVD, there was a very rational concern among American intelligence and military minds that so-called UFOs could be the result of some very advanced Russian technology.
Right.
And if that was true, we were in tremendous trouble.
Well, this was typical paranoia of the Cold War. The Americans thought that the UFOs could be Russian, and the Russians thought the UFOs could be American.
Exactly, and that is borne out in those
this was
papers.
part of the secrecy, too.
And we'll be back with you shortly on the next reel.
Right, and we'll move into the beginning of the 90s, and where especially Mexico will become more and more prominent.
Exactly. So we'll see you shortly on Ultimate UFO.